All right, in Idaho, the long and winding road that has marked the quadruple murder case of Bryan Kohberger has taken a dramatic turn. This after a judge ruled the accused murderer's trial could be moved out of Latah County. The case will get a new judge in the process. This ruling marks a major victory for the defense because it pushed for a change of venue at a court hearing just a couple of weeks ago. The defense had argued that there were strong emotions in this small, tight-knit community, along with negative publicity of Kohberger, and that this all made it impossible for him to get a fair trial in the county where the murders took place. So Latah County encompasses the college town of Moscow, home to the University of Idaho. And that is where Kohberger is accused of brutally stabbing 4 university students to death in November of 2022. Defense attorneys pointed to a survey that they conducted claiming a majority of people in Latah County, 67%, believe Kohberger is guilty. The lawyers argued that a mob mentality exists among local residents that would lead to riots if he were convicted. They were pushing for the trial to be moved to Latah County, where Boise, the capital of Idaho, is located. But the prosecution insisted a fair and impartial trial could be held in Latah County, where the murders happened, and that media coverage of the case extends far beyond Moscow, Idaho. In his ruling, Judge John C. Judge, yes, that's the judge's name, said the defense had shown a, quote, reasonable likelihood that prejudicial news coverage will compromise a fair trial in Latah County. He added the courthouse wasn't big enough to handle the case and that court and police staff were also insufficient. But Judge stopped short of saying where the trial should be moved to and which new judge should take it over. He referred all of that to the state Supreme Court to decide. The trial was scheduled to begin in June of next year. For more on all this, let's go to our legal panel. Jesse Weber, News Nation's legal contributor and Law and Crime Network host, and Misty Marris, a trial attorney and legal analyst. Great to have both of you. First of all, how surprising is this that the judge agreed, nope, we got to move it?
I think all of us thought this was a long shot for the defense. And it's because you're talking about a case that has national interest.
Right.
Forget moving it out of a county. Anywhere in the United States, there's intense media interest on that case. But when I was listening to the hearing, I could tell the judge was really looking at this survey and the results of the survey that the defense conducted, and specifically the point that there was going to be a lot of problems in that county if there was an acquittal, and it could potentially prejudice jurors who didn't want to be responsible for an acquittal where everything is so personal. And the judge said, this is one of the hardest decisions in my career.
Wow.
And that's when I felt, I think we could see this change of venue actually happening.
Jesse, the judge does say in his ruling not only that Kohberger deserves a fair trial, remember it's a death penalty eligible case, but he said he cites that phone survey. 67% of people say he's guilty. 51% say it would be hard to convince me that he's not guilty. Those are big numbers.
So it was 98% of the people they surveyed, 98% knew about this case. And of that, 67% said they would find him guilty. And look, you look at those numbers, you say that's pretty big. If you move it over to Latah County, so Latah County is 41,000 people, Latah County, 500,000 people. You could see maybe similar statistics, but you're also looking at a larger group of people. And I will tell you, look, I thought the judge wasn't going to change venue because his consideration was, I don't want to delay this case any further. But when you heard about the complications, this was a case where you had to schedule it when it wasn't the school year because of the complications. Is there enough space for all of the witnesses and the jury members and reporters? And also, do you want to impact the students with this kind of trial?
I mean, they were already so traumatized by these 4 murders.
Yeah, you started to get the sense that he might move it. I will tell you, I actually think this is beneficial to the prosecution.
Why?
So the defense, obviously, short-term victory, right? They were concerned about their client not getting a fair trial. The evidence doesn't change. If I ask a person in California or ask a person in New York whether or not you think Bryan Kohberger is guilty, the evidence is pretty strong. If the prosecution can secure a conviction against him, the defense has now lost the opportunity to say, he didn't get a fair trial, right? There was an unfair jury pool. They've lost that argument. They've lost to be able to make that successful argument. So I think there's a strong chance that he could be convicted and the prosecution will be able to secure that conviction on appeal.
Remember, Misty, Latah County, this is where the Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow murder trials just happened, 2 also very high-profile, highly publicized cases, both ending in convictions, by the way.
Yes, and that was part of the defense argument, that there's other areas that are more equipped to handle the intense media coverage and everything that comes along with that. Talking about Vallow and Daybell, specifically when it comes to Boise, which we don't know if that's going to be the court, but
Where
that's
else
what was
would it be,
referenced.
though?
It's going to be another larger jurisdiction. To Jesse's point, the prosecution's argument to cure those issues with the jury pool was simply to go out and get more jurors, right? To have a more laborious process. Right. And so now you're going to have that larger pool in any of those bigger metropolitan areas. But part of that was also that the courthouse itself might not be equipped to handle a high-profile trial. And we know Vallow and Daybell, those were high-profile trials.
It was interesting. The judge wrote in his ruling, Jesse, while some of the coverage of this case has been neutral, much of it has been sensationalized and detrimental to Kohberger. That's not just in Moscow, Idaho. That's across the country.
True.
And it's largely because of the huge amount of evidence implicating him in these awful crimes.
And I think he was very persuaded by the defense's experts that were presented. And I think when they said, if you look at the negative coverage and you look at it in particular, Latah County, small, close-knit community, it's more prejudicial to have the trial here. Yeah, you're going to have negative coverage across the country, but with a wider group of people to choose from, that's the main concern. Where it will be, it'll be up to determine for the Supreme Court. I just think that at this point, look, if you're trying to push this trial forward, and I get the frustration of the family, because this could delay it further. But
that was my next question.
Yeah, I get it, because this might delay it, it might not delay it, but at the end of the game, if the game is to secure a conviction against Bryan Kohberger, I will say once again, the evidence is very strong against him. And if you want to secure a conviction that will not be overturned on appeal, this is actually the best case scenario for them.
But we did hear the pleas from the family to keep it in that county, and that's something else the judge was going to have to take into consideration.
It's the victim's family, every single witness, and they're all going to have to drive. It's a 5-hour drive if it goes to Boise, a 5-hour drive from Moscow, Idaho to Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
This is not a small thing for the lawyers, the witnesses, the victim's family
who want to be there every single day. Of course.
I was saying, I was confused why the judge didn't make this decision earlier, right? Some of these things, he was waiting for the surveys, he was waiting for the defense experts, but in terms of whether or not you have enough court staff, whether or not the sheriffs have enough deputies for the security of that building, didn't you know that a year ago? And so when the family says you could have decided this, I actually think they have a strong point.
And it's interesting because remember the expansive gag order that was in place that also gagged the families from speaking about this case? That was all in an effort to keep information out of the public sphere so that the case could go forward in Latah County.
Is the judge being super careful here because Bryan Kohberger faces the death penalty if he's convicted? I mean, is that why? I mean, you've got to dot every I, cross every T. Yes, I'm saying that right.
That's right.
I always get it
I think that's right. I think Jesse made a great point that the judge is looking and saying, what does an appellate record look like? And if I don't decide this threshold issue, if there's a potential for prejudice, well, that could be something that overturns a verdict on appeal.
Yeah, because look at Alec Murdaugh, right? They got a conviction. Now there's the question, is there going to be a second trial? That's the worst thing that could happen to the victims' families, is having to relive a case, a second trial.
Boy, I really feel for those family members, facing not only now a potential delay, but a commute of incredible hours long, just to go see justice done for your loved one, your son or daughter. All right. Jesse, Misty, thank you so much.